Gods are at the top of the power pyramid in Dungeons & Dragons. They hold all the power and live with that power in the different heavens or hells of the multiverse. There are many of them, some stronger than others. Today, we're gonna talk about what I personally consider to be the best goddess, my favorite goddess. Not necessarily the strongest or the most powerful, not necessarily even the most well-known one either. I just think she is the coolest, and I want to show you why. Today, we're going to talk about Eilistraee, the goddess of beauty, song and dance, freedom, sword work, and hunting. The only good god of the Drow. Before we get started though, this video is brought to you by the Kickstarter Grimhollow Player's Guide, a book filled with toolkits that you will definitely need to upstart your campaign and characters. Grimhollow is a dark fantasy world setting that came out from a book released from a very successful Kickstarter a few years ago. The book was awesome, quite frankly. The setting itself was fantastic, but what really caught my eye back then were the tools and character options that they gave you to make your adventure better. See, they added new properties that you could add to your mundane or magical weapons, something that I've been asking for so long. So for example, you could have a brutal great axe, or a swift great axe, or a scatter great axe, and each of those changed the way your great axe functioned, making it feel completely different. They had a plethora of feats and new spells, and I've already blown your ear before about their transformations, which I still hold that they are revolutionary. I am literally transforming one of my players into an eldritch aberration thanks to that book. It's awesome. Thing is, that book was mostly a campaign setting book. The book was designed to bring you into a new world. Now they're doing a full book that is literally just filled with character tools. A glorious full book just filled with things that I already know that I will use. From new subclasses to new spells to new transformations that your characters can go through. Based on the amazing job that they did with the character options in the first book, I just can't wait to see what they do here. Thing is, their Kickstarter is about to end, so this is your last chance to get in before it's over. By reaching $450,000, they already unveiled that they're doing a Spectre transformation, and I am all over myself about it. I cannot wait. Get in there before it's over. Grimhollow, the Player's Guide on Kickstarter. But now, back to the video. The Sildarine, as it is known, is the pantheon of gods that the elves revere. However, thanks to a major schism, the pantheon was radically split, with some breaking away to become the Dark Sildarine. Those gods left the heavens to follow the Dark Elves and rule over them. Now, the Dark Sildarine has 8 gods, championed by the leader Lolth, goddess of assassins, chaos, darkness, and spiders. Some of these gods you might hear from every once in a while, like Veyron, for example, is the god of drow males and the god of evil activity on the surface, so quite a popular one. Gonadaur is a big name too, for he is the god of jellies, oozes, ropers, and slimes. But Eilistraee, in the lore she is quite unknown. In fact, if you were to ask a drow about her, they wouldn't know what to tell you. Most of them don't even know that she exists. The drow matriarchs and keepers of knowledge hide information about her, kids don't get taught about her, and anyone that even mentions her name gets radically punished. See, Eilistraee has one mission: to save the Drow from Lolth, to bring those dark elves from their subterranean homes and usher them out, to have them see the real world, to smell the flowers, to dance under the moonlight, to save them from their webbed prison. Eilistraee is the protector of the few Drow who long to return to the surface at peace with the other races, to abandon their endless conflicts and live in happiness. If you are an escaped Drow, if you have somehow broken the chokehold that Lolth had on you and escaped, Eilistraee is your champion, the one who will take care of you, the one who will offer you sustenance, a home, the one who will teach you the ways of the world, the one who will finally grant you the happiness that Lolth took away the day of your birth. Eilistraee appears as a naked, glossy-skinned female drow, 9 feet tall with ankle-length swooping hair of glowing silver. Her hair and wandering silvery radiances cloak her body in a smoothly, continuously moving array of beauty. Most times, she's only seen from afar, perched on a hillock or battlement, silver hair streaming out behind her. Other times, one can only see a silver radiance accompanied by a wordless snatch of song or few echoing harp notes. The only times that she's ever seen close is to dance with her followers. She sometimes appears in the midst of a dance in her honor. As her followers dance all together around a fire, she might be seen leaping amid the flames of the feast unharmed. The most rare of apparitions is when she manifests to a worshipper who honors her with a solitary dance, as the silver radiance transforms the recipient's hair into a mane of silver fire for a month or sometimes even permanently. Now that is to those above the ground. To those below, she offers guidance and light to those who need it. She manifests silver fire to those lost in the darkness to guide them. She manifests light to those who feel alone and in need of support. She will guide you and help you find something you dropped in the darkness, or give you a song of encouragement if you're giving birth in the night. But most of all, to those underground, she aids in escaping. The Dark Maiden sings her call to all Dark Elves, from the highest matron mother to the lowest male slave, sending them dreams or visions, showing them a different, better life and the beauty of the world. And despite the continued effort of Lolth to stop these visions, many Drow definitely come to feel the Dark Dancer at some point in their lives. Eilistraee calls them outside to the moon, to relinquish their shackles and armors, and dance naked in the moonlight. Now, all clerics of Eilistraee are female, and collectively they are called Dark Ladies, whereas acolytes and aspirants and those who wish to join the temple but have not yet attained full priesthood are called Maids. In essence, anyone who wants to support and help and pray to Eilistraee can, and everyone will receive her help and guidance, but only females will get clerics and paladins spells. That being said, there actually aren't many clerics per se, or paladins for that matter. Only about 6% of the clergy of Eilistraee are clerics, and only 2% are crusaders. The overwhelming bulk of the clergy are what we call sword dancers, taking over 90% of the clergy. See, Eilistraee is a goddess of beauty and song, a goddess of peace and dance, but her symbol doesn't have her carry a sword for nothing. She's also a goddess of sword work, and her style is that of a dancing symphony of blades. The signature weapon of her and her sword dancers are what we call singing swords, powerful long swords enchanted to sing loudly when drawn, a singing that enchants and empowers the wielder with bravery and finesse. Thanks to the enchanted music, the wielders were immune to any magic that would alter their mental state of being, and any magic that was based off of sound, like the music of harpies or the scream of shriekers, just does not work on them. The swords glue with a silvery fire that also protected the blades from breaking or rusting. These sword dancers were trained to be able to sing and dance through pain, so they could perform in the midst of combat, something that was needed since some of the most powerful and signature spells of Eilistraee were based out of songs. Music and song held a particular meaning in the church, as they were the intimate nature of Eilistraee's iconic magic. They call it the Spellsong, a melody capable of healing, creating, and protecting. There were two types of Spellsong, the lesser variety and the greater variety. The lesser variety, though, is ironically, quite frankly, broken. Mechanically speaking, it is just very strong. Lesser Spellsong is a third level evocation spell with a casting of 1 round that enabled the caster, by song and supplication to Eilistraee, to cause an effect equivalent to any desired priest spell of 3rd level or less. The spell would have its normal effect, range, duration, and saving throws. However, if the spell had a material component requirement higher than 100 gold pieces, then you would have to sing for an extra round for each 100 gold piece of value above the first 100. To put it mildly, Lesser Spellsong just allowed you to cast any cleric spell of 3rd level or lower without having to prepare them, or effectively without needing to pay the cost of the material components. You could cast Revivify without needing a diamond, as long as you sang for just about 3 rounds straight. Now, the real Spellsong, a 6th level spell, allows for a multitude of things, from replicating spells of 4th level or lower, to granting spell immunities, to heal, to cure blindness, poison, and disease, to even creating the spell regeneration. The more dancers and singers that joined on the chorus of the spell, the more powerful the spell became. Essentially, Spellsong worked as a weaker version of Wish, using divine words, or in this case singing, to produce a plethora of options that would aid the caster. Another famous Eilistraean spell was Blade Dance, where blade dancers could enchant their weapons to gain a will of their own, to fly and attack on their own. The warrior would throw the weapon into the air, and then both the warrior and the sword would join together in a dance of death against the enemy. Now, aside from being female, another restriction that the clergy of Eilistraee must follow is that they must be skilled in the playing of at least one of the Dark Maiden's favorite instruments, the horn, the flute, or the harp. They must also be adequate singers for the magic to work, and they must also be fit and graceful dancers. The clergy is meant to nurture beauty, music, the craft of making musical instruments, and song whenever they find it. Priests of the Dark Maiden who have the coins to do so are expected to hire any strange minstrel or bard they meet for a song or two. Lay worshippers are encouraged to do so. The clergy of Eilistraee are not just beautiful, but also deadly. See, there's just much danger that the Drow face, not just from Lolth and her evil Drow, but also from the humans and elves from above. Look, quite frankly, humans don't trust Dark Elves, and they have good reason not to. Dark Elves that are seen under the night sky above ground are always there to enslave and murder. The clergy of Eilistraee need to be able to protect themselves and those they care about, from those who don't understand. However, the sword is only there for protection. Most of the work that the clergy of Eilistraee go through is that of peace and help, at least that's what they're supposed to do. So now let's talk about the dogma of the goddess. Quote, "Aid the weak, strong, grateful and churlish alike. Be always kind, save in battle with evil. Encourage happiness everywhere. Lift hearts with kind words, jests, songs, and merriment. Learn how to cook game and how best to hunt it. Learn new songs, dances, and ways with weapons and spices and recipes, and pass this learning on whenever possible. Learn how to play, make, and repair musical instruments. Practice music and sword work. Defend and aid all folk, promoting harmony between the races. Strangers are your friends. The homeless must be given shelter from storms under your own roof if need be. Repay rudeness with kindness. Repay violence with swift violence, that the fewest may be hurt and danger fast removed from the land. The faithful must aid Drow who are in distress. If the distressed are fighting with other Drow, the combat is to be stopped with as little bloodshed as possible. So long as the Drow met with are not working evil on others, they are to be aided and given the message of Eilistraee. A rightful place awaits you in the realms above, in the lands of the great light. Come in peace and live beneath the sun again, where trees and flowers grow." End quote. See, Eilistraee actually cares. It's not just about saving the Drow from Lolth and taking them up above ground, it's about making sure that they can actually have a place to live up here. It's no good if they only find hatred and despair in here as well, and so Eilistraee teaches her followers to help strangers whenever possible, to lift hearts with kind words and to meet rudeness with kindness. Slowly, the people will understand that not all Drow are bad, and soon enough, they will accept them. Now, the priests are allowed to keep and accumulate money that is given to them as offerings as long as the money is to be used to buy food, musical instruments, and tools, such as good swords for example, to serve the will of the goddess. They are even allowed to go on adventures, as long as they feed, aid, and defend the needy along the way. Quote, "Faithful of Eilistraee are encouraged to give food to others in need with a prayer to the goddess, to act with kindness, and to give food and money they can spare to their priests. Priests are to feed themselves by their own gardening and hunting skills as much as possible, and to try to convert at least one stranger per moon to the worship of Eilistraee. When priests of the goddess must fight evil, they are to burn the bodies of the evil creatures they slay as an offering to the goddess, unless such creatures are edible and non-sentient, and there are hungry folk near. Any hungry travelers met with who offer no threats are to be fed by the faithful of Eilistraee. While traveling, priests are to carry food with them for this purpose at all times. Where food cannot be purchased or received, it must be gathered or hunted for. Faithful of Eilistraee are to set aside food and give it as often as possible to strangers in need, particularly outcasts and those of other races. If food yet remains, it is to be given to the priest of Eilistraee, that they may do the same, and none shall go hungry. In times of plenty, store food for lean times ahead. In harsh winters, patrol the lands about to find and take in the lost, the hurt, and those caught in the teeth of the cold. Whenever possible, food should be eaten with the accompanied of song. Except for properly set occasions, a feast should be accompanied by merriment. The faithful of the Dark Maiden are commanded to promote happiness and gaiety whenever possible. When faithful and allies of a priest fall in battle, any priest present must, if possible, provide burial and a funeral song and comfort to the bereaved." End quote. The thing about Eilistraee is that she's a practical goddess. She teaches her followers what they need in order to survive in a new and hostile world, especially because Drow have no clue what the overland is really like. They have lived in darkness their whole life. They have no cattle in the Underdark. They have no traditional farms. You don't hunt in a forest in the same way you hunt in the Underdark. Drow have no clue how to survive out there, and Eilistraee understands this. She teaches them hunting, gathering, feeding, and how to share the knowledge that they have gathered onto others. Now let's go and cover the important ceremonies that the clergy goes through and the temples of Eilistraee. See, the temples are interesting because they're not technically constructions. Eilistraee, as one would imagine from an elvish goddess, appreciates natural beauty more than tall and complex constructions. Her temples are found in natural glades in the middle of a forest, in a place where one could easily see the night sky and appreciate the moon, and a place where one could just dance freely and move about. Typically there will be a beautiful cave nearby where the clergy may rest, but generally speaking, those temples are quite simple. All that's actually needed is a place to see the moon, a place to dance and enjoy and eat, a furnace to make swords, and, well, preferably a place with ore that they could mine and smelt for said swords. Prayers to Eilistraee are interesting too. Worship to her is typically done as a hunt. The Dark Ladies perform a hunt that is then followed by a feast. After the feast, there is a dance and a circle of song, in which the worshippers will sit and dance in turns in a circle, each one in succession leading a song. As far as more traditional prayers go, there are daily prayers that are sung whenever there is time, but typically this happens in the evening. This is more often than not where you'll find a cleric leading others in a single beautiful big song. At night, worshippers of Eilistraee perform what is called an evensong, a personal, intimate, and most oftentimes wordless song done in private, where the person tries to let out all those gathered emotions of the day. See, Eilistraee likes helping her worshippers, and so she tries to relieve them of their stress, anxiety, and emotional baggage by listening to their evensongs at night, and then calming them down and lending them her strength. Some of the rougher parts of the clergy, as we talked about before, is that they must learn how to cope with pain so that they may dance and sing in the middle of combat, as that's just how their magic works. One of the rituals that they go through in order to practice this is through the enchanting of their weapons. Quote, whenever a sword is finished or first taken into use by a worshipper of the Dark Maiden, a priest tries to call down the blessing of the goddess upon it. This is done by planting the blade point down into the ground, out of doors and by night, and then dancing. The sword dance circles the blade and involves the priest drawing blood from each of her limbs by dancing momentarily against the blade. If successful, the blade glows with a silvery radiance. For 3 months, it does not break or rust. If a drow weapon, it is also made immune to the sun. And though lacking a bonus or dwemer, can strike creatures normally hit only by magical weapons, end quote. This is particularly important because drow-made weapons are really strong, but their enchantments only work in the dark. Their enchantments fade if they ever see the sun, and then the sword gets ruined. This ceremony protects the blade from such a factor. And remember, most of these dark maidens are actually drow, so this matters a lot. One of the less commonly seen rituals that they go through is the one they call the High Hunt. This one only happens once in each of the seasons, but essentially the clergy of Eilistraee prepare to hunt a great and dangerous beast, sometimes a monster. As it is tradition, the hunt cannot be made with ranged weapons, only with a single blade. The hunters who follow the Dark Ladies may wear whatever they like, but the priestesses themselves must go naked. If the monster is slain, you will get chanted prayer and a circle dance to the goddess. They must do this once a season, including winter. An even more rare tradition is the one they call the Run. This one is a mandatory ceremony that worshippers of Eilistraee must do at least once a year, where they go alone to where they would be strangers. Basically, they leave their community and their friends to go look for communities of other races, any place where they would not be recognized and or probably even be feared. In there, they must rely on their music, on their kind ways, and sometimes even sword skills to keep them from being slain. See, as a drow, this is very difficult, for drow tend to be be attacked on sight many times. But if you happen to not be a drow and you're attempting to do the run as a disciple or priest of Eilistraee, you're expected to blacken your body with natural dyes and oils and boil certain leaves and berries to make your hair silvery, to make yourself basically look like a drow. You may also use spells like Disguise Self to change the way you look, and then you perform the run. Priests of the Dark Maiden go where they are strangers, making an effort to seek out other communities and then bring them game, kindness, and helping hands. They try to learn new songs, music, and sword ways this way too. They try to show the world basically that drow can live in peace with others. They don't do this to preach their faith or to make a mark for themselves, but instead to promote the idea that drow can be good. Now, priests that do not die in battle and actually get to survive to old age can perform the greatest ritual to Eilistraee, the Last Dance. Quote, "In old age, Eilistraee's priests hear the goddesses singing to them by night, calling them to her. When the song feels right, they go out unclad under the moonlit sky and dance, never to be seen again. Those who have observed such dances say that the goddess comes and sings overhead, and the aged priest begins to dance more effortlessly, looking younger and younger. Her hair begins to glow with the same radiance as the Dark Maiden's, and then she becomes slowly translucent, fading away as the dance goes on. In the end, only a silvery radiance is heard, with two voices, the goddess and her priest, raised together in melancholy, tender song." End quote. And then lastly, let's talk about the clothing and attire for the priestesses, since I bet this is probably a worry for many of you who might be thinking of being a cleric or paladin of Eilistraee. The priests wear their hair long and they dress practically for any activity. If they are hunting, they generally wear leathers. For battle, they wear armor. A priestess of Eilistraee is not going to cook without an apron, for example. However, for rituals, they will wear the least amount of clothing possible. Many times that means in the nude. And when relaxing, you will see many of them in transparent gowns. Now, for adventurers, it is a tad different. During adventures, it is expected for the clergy to garb themselves for any eventuality, so typically with magical armor or armor of drow make. When it comes to weapons, you must always use swords in battle. If no swords are found, then you must use a kind of bladed weapon. Bows and ranged weapons are kind of taboo for Eilistraee, but if there's no other option, then it is allowed. You are, however, expected to always be carrying your sword, and as being clergy of Eilistraee, you actually have to know how to craft swords too. Eilistraee's dislike of ranged weapons is actually very interesting, and it is tied up to her history. See, Eilistraee is actually the daughter of both Corellon Larethian, the patriarch and leader of the Elvish Pantheon, and Lolth, the matriarch and leader of the Drow Pantheon. Both Corellon and Lolth used to be lovers. Back then, before she became Lolth, she used to be called YOshimura. Together, they had a son and a daughter, Veyraum, who we talked about at the beginning of the video, and Eilistraee. Now, Eilistraee was a true huntress, with incredible perception and great skills with the bow, a free-spirited and kind-hearted goddess, with a fiery streak in her personality. She adored her father, loved him with all of her heart, but not everyone did. Her mother, YOshimura, prepared a plan to kill him so that she may take the mantle as the leader of Arvandor, the heaven of the elves. Her plan had two phases. The first phase would have her create a fake peace treaty between Corellon and his greatest nemesis, Gruumsh, the god of the orcs. In this meeting, Gruumsh would attack Corellon and attempt to kill him, and in order to help make that happen, YOshimura crafted a beautiful scabbard for Corellon's sword, a cursed item, however. The cursed item was meant to betray Corellon in his weakest moment so that he may kill him. The plan being that when it was time for Corellon to fight Gruumsh, his sword might not bulge out of the scabbard. That plan failed, however, and the scabbard was lost in the battle. A failure that was actually partly intended, for there was a phase 2 to this plan. Before phase 2 could be enacted, a problem arose. It had seemed that Sehanine Moonbow, a goddess of dreams and moonlight in the Elvish Pantheon, saw the treachery in her divination. As she attempted to counsel YOshimura to stop this madness, she was captured by her with the help of Veyraum. It had seemed that Corellon's own son and Eilistraee's brother was in on the plan. With Sehanine captured, the plan then continued. Phase 2 had Veyraum take advantage of Eilistraee's adoration of her father father and lead her to attempt to find the scabbard with her great eyesight and tracking skills, which she did. However, before she could return it to her father, Arvander was attacked. The attack came from many of Corellon's enemies, including Gunnadour and many other ogre gods. Now, the Dark Maiden took part in the battle, enthusiastic and proud to be able to fight by her father's side in defense of their home. And then, in the heat of the battle that ensued, when Gunnadour made its entrance, it became obvious to Corellon that someone had betrayed him, for an evil monster like Gunnadour could only enter Arvander if another great evil already existed within that would allow him entrance. In the distraction and shock that Corellon had, an ogre god charged towards Corellon and almost ended his life. Eilistraee, seeing his father in danger and in hopes of saving him, she quickly loosened an arrow at the ogre god. What the young goddess didn't know was that the scabbard that YOshimura had crafted for Corellon's sword was imbued with a curse which magically drew the shaft of the arrow, changing its path to instead pierce the chest of her father. The other gods, unaware of the deception, charged in on Eilistraee and subdued her. Now, in spite of all of this, the battle was won by the Sildarine, but Corellon was almost mortally wounded, and all the gods gathered around him. This was to be the end of the second phase of YOshimura's plan. Faking grief and sadness, she pretended to attempt to save her lover, but instead, she looked to use a concoction of poisonous herbs to kill him. The herbs were typically made by Eilistraee to coat the arrows of the mortal Dark Elves. She wanted to pass the poison as a healing elixir, and in the case that she was discovered, she could simply blame Eilistraee as the potion was indeed her work. The plan in the end didn't work, as Sehanin Moonbow escaped her prison ahead of time and saved Corellon at the last minute, with her illuminating everyone as to the real culprit of it all. It had seemed that all the Dark Elven gods were behind the plot, all of them except for Eilistraee, who was merely an unwitting participant. Corellon then banished all of the Dark Elven gods from Arvander for this treachery. In spite of the fact that Eilistraee was cleared of any wrongdoing and allowed to stay, she decided instead to take in the punishment as well, as she foresaw that the Dark Elves would need a beacon of good within their reach, and that her help would be needed for them in the times to come. That is why Eilistraee never uses a bow anymore, as she nearly killed her own father with one. She swore that she would never use ranged weaponry again, lest her missile go astray once more. Instead, all of her clerics get magic missiles as domain spells, since those never miss. Now, due to a history of grief and losses and to the suffering of her people, melancholy and sadness were deeply rooted in Eilistraee's heart. It was a hard battle to endure, one that could weigh her down. However, it also taught her to search for and nurture beauty everywhere, even in places like the Underdark, where it didn't seem to belong. Eilistraee fought her melancholy by striving to bring hope and joy wherever there was sorrow, so that no moment was lost to gloom, and to make life flourish wherever she went. She learned to find happiness in peace and arts, especially music and dance, and in simple things like seeing artists composing and performing, craftsmen at their work, people doing acts of kindness, and lovers in tender moments. She especially took delight in helping the needy in various practical ways, with a soft spot for outcasts, and in blessing artists with sudden bursts of creativity and inspiration. And on this, she attempted to teach these things to her drow so that they may find happiness in the darkness. To tell them once again that a rightful place does await them in the realms above, in the lands of the great light. To come in peace and live beneath the sun again, where trees and flowers grow. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you are at all interested in creating for yourself a Blade Dancer Cleric of Eilistraee, I would recommend going over to the 5th edition lore book Sword Coast Adventures Guide. In there you can find a subclass for the wizard called Blade Singing, which is essentially what you would be looking for. A martial style of combat where you as the caster, instead of sitting in the back lines, go to the front lines and use intricate maneuvers in combination with a single longsword to battle. The maneuvers in this case would be singing and dancing, of course. It works really well with the theme and style, except for the fact that, well, It is a wizard subclass, not a cleric, obviously. If you could seduce your DM into moving these features over into a cleric domain, then you could probably do something even closer and better, but otherwise, I don't think it is personally a big deal. There's no reason why you cannot be a strict follower of Eilistraee, but be a wizard instead of a cleric. I mean, anything is possible. I would like to personally thank my Patreon supporters, Zach Bowell, Barry Maskant, 5E Magic Shop, Morgan Johnson, Rusty Rain, Biotechnofrag, Daniel Luna, Duck Feeder, Brad Salazar, Terry Culp, The Great Codini, Walker Motley, Omega Scales, Karathas the Bulwark, Xiran King, Ozol, Ariel Nelson, Alex Cookson, Griffin Pierce, Falky951, Benjamin Bosters, Mr. Salty, Thomas Hunt, Drayden, Tesla Coil, The Role-Playing Junkies Podcast, Prince Daylight Morning Crown, Sabim Kurshab, Solarensis, Ordoric, William Sladden, Nathan McComb, Silent Shoppa, Bushido Burrito, AG Dare, Soulless Rider, Roleplay with Advantage, Stalia, Items to Astound on DM's Guild, Samuel King, Lost Crusader, Jacob Ortiz, Tython, Sean Duthat, Treb909, Garrett Minnick, JD Green, Famin52, George Fortland, and Sovereign Mind for supporting me on Patreon at the $25 level. If you would like to support me as well, then please head on over to patreon.com/MrRex to support. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. I do want to take this time here to, tell you guys that I have actually started uploading my lore play for Baldur's Gate 3, where we go through the game and instead of just talking about the gameplay or talking about, I don't know what you would normally talk about in a Let's Play, we instead talk about the lore. We talk about the world, we talk about the characters, we talk about the context of the things that are happening. I mean, like, obviously Baldur's Gate has a lot to do with Mind Flayers and Gith, so we talk about where the Mind Flayers come from, like, what's their culture, what's the culture of the Gith, where do they come from, right? We basically just talk about what's happening within the context of the lore and in kind of a walkthrough-like format. So if you're interested in that, I'm uploading those videos over on Patreon for any of my patrons. So basically from $1 and up, just a single dollar, and you get access to all those videos. We already have, at this point, I believe, 4 videos up, and we'll be having more of them up every Tuesday and Friday from here on out. So just about 2 videos a week, with currently just about 4 or 5 videos that are currently up at the time you see this. It might be 4. But yeah, if you guys are interested in that, go over to Patreon. It's just a single dollar and you get access to all of them. My way of just giving you guys a little something for just supporting me over there. But yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you guys for being here, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.